What's up, guys? It's Sam here, and I wanted to talk about being a fucking adult. What what that entails, right? There's a class in Canada being offered. It's in Ontario, offered adulting for seniors in high school, and I wanted to talk about that both in terms of the education and schooling and the effect that might have. So, with that being said, make sure you press that red button that says subscribe and that bell notification so YouTube can notify you every time I post a new video. All right. So first of all, I'm going to talk about like the purpose of school because I think we have to be on the same page of what school is supposed to achieve, right? In order to have some type of conversation about that, we have to be have the same, or at least understanding of what I mean when I say schooling, right? The definition has to be understood for there to have context about the conversation. So I also wanted to talk about the current state of schooling and give you a little bit of context just on myself. And then lastly, we're going to talk about that class. So if you want to just hear about that class, jump to the end of the video. But I think the interim is actually what's the more important portion of it. The purpose of schooling, if I were to get asked, what is the purpose of schooling, I think that you could probably distill that into two distinct categories. Education, and then the social portion of this. So, if you look at those two individually, it could be argued that the education portion of schooling is very low ROI in the current state of education or schooling. Right now, the social or interpersonal type of skills, the soft skills, that could be very positive ROI. And combined, I think the effect from the social aspect is probably equal to, if not greater, I would say it's definitely greater, I would say, than the effect from the actual education. Because what is taught in a classroom, I mean, come on. It's called the internet. Google it. But if you wanted to distill that down to like just a succinct definition of what is schooling, right? And I think it would be something along the lines of schooling has the purpose to prepare the participants for a successful exit into real life after they finish their schooling. Something along those lines, right? And that is the definition we're going to use as we continue this conversation. Now, when we talk about the current state of education or schooling, I think that giving some perspective on myself would be valuable to understand where I'm coming from on this. So, I was homeschooled my entire life. So K through 12, kindergarten to 12th grade, I never went to school. I was homeschooled my whole life. I do not have a diploma. And then I went, so what's going on up here, right? When you're homeschooled, like, we can read about things in the news, but what actually takes place up here is that, for me, going through that process, I felt that I was different. Like, why didn't I get to go to school? I wanted to play sports, or I would talk to the friends that I had in the neighborhood, and they would talk about something, and I had no idea at all whatsoever what they were talking about, whether that was in school or some other thing that was going on in society. And I had no clue whatsoever what was going on. And so I felt that I was behind from a learning standpoint, and that I felt that I wanted to play sports, and I wasn't playing any sports. That changed as things went on, but that's for a different video, so make sure you press subscribe for that shit. But that feeling of not having the knowledge at the time to understand what my friends might be talking about, right? Because everybody that I knew who I was friends with went to school at that time. So that gave me the desire or the fire to perpetually be learning, to always be learning. Because I was like, well, if these kids know other shit that I don't know, like, how is that? You know, I feel like I'm behind on the learning curve. So I had this fire in me to always be learning, just perpetual knowledge and growth from education standpoint. And after I was homeschooled, I went to a 2-year school because I didn't have a degree. Diploma, and then from there I went to a 4-year school, and then from there I went to a MBA program right away, and so that kind of lays a foundation for the context, very minimally, of like how I might view the world in regards to schooling. And when you go through these classes, literally, like, I had been an entrepreneur, if you want to call it, since I was like a little kid, right? I would buy bags of candy, open up the bags of candy and sell the individual candy, or do the same thing with soda in like a little cart at garage sales, and I would bring it around and sell the soda, and I would go around afterwards and collect the cans because I knew that was an additional return I got from them. And I was like, why these classes like have zero to do with what I'm talking about. Plus, at that moment when I was getting my associates, I was already working. So the stuff that I was learning in school had nothing whatsoever to do with what I was doing at my job. My first job, I worked at like a grocery store in the bulk foods section, and then I think I had a bunch of jobs in clothing at the mall because I wanted to meet girls, and actually that would be a interesting video. Just put a note down there. So when it comes down to the schooling aspect of it, to have a class that encompasses some of the things that are actually important after you get out of school, I think is tremendous. I think that being very malleable at that age, that kids are, they're extremely intelligent from an emotional standpoint, and the knowledge from education standpoint, right? If we split those two up, right? Because the social aspect comes into it, like EQ, right? The emotional intelligence, not IQ, which is like, you know, what you're going to do on your science exam or your math exam, which math I think is valuable personally, but also it depends on obviously the direction you want to go. But the EQ of students, the emotional intelligence of students today is far greater than it was a decade or 2 decades ago, in my opinion. So to go through and actually teach some things like adulting class, where they might learn about some of the stuff in finance, or how to repair drywall in an apartment, or like in a wall, or do something like changing a tire. Not that that's tremendously important, but some of these things are actually valuable. Like some of these other stuff about the planets, or just like, I don't even know some of the other shit. It's just not even slightly in the realm of things that provide value to, right? Go back to the definition, right? The definition for schooling, right, that we just talked about at the beginning, is schooling has a purpose, the intention of giving the tools to these students or participants to successfully place them in a mindset or the ability to take care of themselves after, post the class or whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And going through the material and coming up with classes about adulting, as much as people may want to joke about it, is the beginning stages of the transformation that is going to take place in education over the next decade or 2 decades. Because when you have something that just doesn't, first of all, it is copious, like the amount of money that gets put into education, and then you have such a low ROI like way of spending this money, where you can take that and go do a multitude of other things that has a much higher ROI in terms of education, both from a social aspect and education, the knowledge aspect, right? Because that's how we defined it and we broke down schooling. I think just going to work and having some intentionality about the work, or doing copious amounts of internships, or working abroad, or trying, you know what I mean, a different job every 3 months for a period of time. And I understand not everybody can do this, but laying the foundation of like what financial literacy is and how to actually plan for this, how to not like necessarily do a budget, but like what is your bare bones minimum burn rate? Like what are you trying to achieve? Having some emotional intelligence when it comes to having the conversation around what people want to achieve, what they would like to do. And I think that the vast majority of what people state that they want to do is not based upon their own thought necessarily, more so around the influences around them. So to have a deeper dialogue around some of the things, and this is the perfect generation to do that with, because their EQ, their emotional intelligence, is vastly superior than the previous generations. So the having that conversation and that dialogue around the things that are actually meaningful, right, in life, and how to be successful from, it's not necessarily a financial standpoint. It could be for some people, but it's more so about the mindset, right? Look at the amount of depression and other mental, I don't want to call them disabilities, but issues that take place today, right? The suicide rate is going up, and just the anxiety and all these other things are compounding because it was such a taboo to have these conversations in the past, and that's why they're, anyways, emotional intelligence is so much higher than previous generations. So I think this is a tremendous step forward. I want to bring more attention to this because I think this is an amazing thing to do. And some people might think like, oh, that's the parents' job. Okay, understandable. It could be, I would agree, right? The parents should take responsibility. But then we go back to the foundation. Why go to school then? Right? If the parents are going to actually do it, why have a school? Why pay school taxes? Why send your kids to school? Why not do something more productive in terms of higher ROI activities? ROI not necessarily in terms of money, but in terms of happiness or fulfillment or experience, however somebody wants to define that. And having that dialogue about the self-awareness portion of it, I think is tremendously valuable. Anyways, I appreciate you guys. Don't forget to subscribe and press that little bell notification so YouTube can notify you every time I post a new video. Actually, the next video coming up is going to be interesting about how I went through the process of deciding what I wanted to do when I went to school. Anyways, appreciate